So in this final piece of Jewish Physicist response to the documentary hypothesis, we're going to talk a little bit more about, why is it that the documentary hypothesis caught on, and what does that teach us, and why did it catch on? So it's, a piece that I didn't bring in the last part that I'd like to bring here is that the documentary hypothesis is not the only resonant interpretation of the written Torah. So it's interesting because the Karaites, they also had an approach where they look at a certain word and they just take everything literally, and then all of a sudden, they see what they want to see in the Torah. So you have, it says an eye for an eye. So if you take it literally, an eye for an eye, well, it makes sense that it should mean an eye for an eye, right? So they can look through the whole Torah. And if you've seen, Karaites live and you've been in their community, so you'll look in the Torah and that's exactly what you'll see, right? It'll resonate very well. So just like, documentary hypothesis folks feel that, their theory resonates. So Karaites also, they feel that their interpretation resonates very well. And not only that, but the Christians, they dealt a lot with verses in the Psukim, and they too designed Christianity perhaps in such a way that it would resonate. The Gospels were written many years after the events had taken place, and so the way you describe the events, they know the written Torah, so you can make it in such a way that it can resonate in ways with the written Torah. They can look at any time it says three in the Torah, so they'll say, the Trinity, right? They look at any time it talks about sacrificing, the sacrifice of Yitzchak when Abraham went to sacrifice his son, so they'll see the sacrifice of Yoshka in there, right? And the Paschal offering, the lambs that we sacrificed on Pesach. So also they're going to see Yoshka in there, and they'll have different ways of seeing what they want to see in the text, and it resonates by definition, by design. And so all three ways can resonate, and I'll just mention with the Christian interpretation. So I knew a guy who had spent just a little bit of time involved in Judaism, learning about it, and for a short period of time, he felt like Jews were hypocritical, and so when he read things about Christianity, so he's like, well, this kind of resonates with me because, the New Testament's always saying that the Jews are hypocrites, and he was like, this is what I've seen around me, so everything resonated with him about that, and he was like feeling a little like maybe he should get into Christianity, and so he spent more time in a Jewish community, and then he realized that really the Jews aren't hypocrites, right? In general, there's elements about every person that a person can, not be perfect. When you really see a community up close and have, a good eye, you can really see the good in everybody. There's a mitzvah, you have to love your fellow as yourself. So what you see is incredible. You see a community where people give to each other in a way that you couldn't imagine. The love that a person has for their fellow Jew, the whole Torah comes and helps a person to love his fellow Jew literally as himself. And it's a beautiful thing, And, once we build up a community, once we build ourselves, we try to perfect ourselves, then we perfect, our family, we make our family a beautiful, holy, giving place. And then the community around us is affected, and ultimately we go on to affect the world. We don't believe in big slogans to, go advertise everything around the world. As Jews, we work on ourselves, and this is how the world is created. It's in the little things. We work on the little things, and also want to get the big things right, but this is really the way we build ourselves and build the world. So these are things where, like, any interpretation that one has of the Torah that stuck around for a while, it's going to resonate. So if you took a Karaite, you took a Christian, and you took a biblical critic, an atheist, and you put them all in a room and said, discuss your interpretations. So each one would come out with thinking that his interpretation was correct, right? The Karaite would say, my interpretation's correct, just read the text. The Christian would say, look at this pasuk, this verse, I'm correct. And the critic would say, look, I'm correct, see these dissonances. And I think that's a very good proof that if such a hypothesis would resonate with a person, it doesn't mean anything, because we've literally shown that just with the thought experiment, right? We've literally shown that it's insignificant. And now the most interesting part is to say, where do such interpretations arise? Where does it come from? What's the root in Torah? Everything has a root in the Torah. So I would want to say that it came from Korach. We look at the story of Korach in the Torah, that Korach challenged the interpretation of the Torah of Moshe, Torah's Moshe. He said, look, Moshe, You're saying that there should be, leaders and Kohanim and different classes within the Jewish people, that people should have different roles. And he said, look, every Jew is holy, which in essence is a true concept. Every Jew is holy. So Korach wanted to say, let every Jew be equal. And was he motivated by true intellectual honesty, or was he motivated by something else? So Chazal teach us that, what did he want? He wanted to be accepted by the Kohanim. He felt that he was deprived of his proper place amongst the Kohanim, and he wanted to be a Kohen. And so when he approached Moshe and Aaron, he was really saying, you shouldn't be in power, I should be in power. I should, he wanted acceptance into the ranks of power. And so it's very interesting because we see all of these different interpretations. In what period do they arise? So if it was an honest intellectual approach, there are people being mechadish things in Torah every single day in every generation. People come up with beautiful insights and concepts into Torah at all times, times of rest, times of not rest, exciting times, not exciting times. And, probabilistically, one would expect that these different interpretations would arise at random times. But the truth is that these interpretations come at times where the Jews want acceptance, where the Jews have self-loathing or self-pity. So the Saddukim, they also have their interpretation, and the Christians. So all of that was at a time where the Greeks were very powerful. And the Jews wanted to be Greek so much that they would even do surgeries, like surgical procedures, and there are several that are documented and known, to get rid of their circumcision. They would pull the skin. It was disgusting surgical procedures. This is something that they would do because they didn't want to look Jewish when they would be naked in the gyms with the Greeks, and that was normal to them, right? Everything around us just becomes normal, but it's really not normal. And so when you have a time like that, for example, with the Kiraites. So around that, it was around the time of the golden age of Spain, the golden age of Islam, and people really wanted to be like the people around them, so you get another interpretation. And similarly in Europe, with the documentary hypothesis, when that caught on, so you see in all of these cases, what is the essence of it? It's like Korach, a person wants to be accepted, right? And at the deeper, I think at the root, it's that a person who wants to be accepted, there's all these different mechanisms that sociologists speak about, identification and different things, where a minority civilization within a majority civilization, particularly where that majority population is desirable in some way, they have a very strong drive not only to change physically, but to adopt the ideals, the thoughts. It affects the person's thinking. It affects the person wants to think like them. And this is what happens. And I think that's really the essence, is that they wanted to be like other people. They pitied themselves. They wanted, they felt like the Jews needed to be redeemed. And so their thought was in all of these cases, a person has if you do a new interpretation of the Torah, you come up with something, or you accept something. So all of a sudden, now you've changed what it means to be a Jew and what a Jew is, and it can be something that's more in line with what a person wants a Jew to be. More in line with non-Jewish culture and non-Jewish values, and through that a person feels that he can go and redeem himself, and he can redeem his community and redeem the Jewish people. But the true answer is that a person has to change their measuring stick, or a person has to, if there is ever a challenge in the Jewish community that a person feels that the Jewish community is not lining up with what they want it to be according to Jewish values, according to true values. So then what does a person do? You don't just create a new theory and make Judaism something else. You say, how can I make the Jewish community better? You take acharayus, you take responsibility, and you try to do things that you can to make the world a better place. A Jew acts, a Jew does. You don't run away. So this is I think what should have been the proper approach at the time. I think that people should have really introspected, looked into the historical values of humanity, and seen that German culture at the time, or whatever culture they were in, it was just a blip in world values and world culture. It's going to change. That culture's not there anymore today. So the thing that they gave up their whole belief in for, so it's not even around anymore, and it just makes them look silly. Mendelssohn's children ended up being Christians, right? He started to get into the non-Jewish culture and things, And so he had his whole intellectual way of explaining that that Judaism was just a legal thing, and he was able to do something that was more in line with like non-Jewish culture and morals. And it turned out all his kids ended up being Christians. So I think we just have to have personal dignity, to have a respect for Judaism and for our fellow Jews, and a love for our fellow Jews. And I think that through that, a person can really make the world a better place and do what Hashem put us here to do. And with that, I conclude this podcast. Actually, I'll just add on at the end that this concept of the documentary hypothesis, often at a university, in like a Jewish studies course, it can be treated as fact. I've seen in courses where books and professors will say like, all scholars agree that such and such is the origin of the Torah. And I think not only is it arrogance, but it's really coming from a place of you look at the origin of the field. And it was a time where they would talk about the science of Judaism, like the early conservative movement in Judaism, so they would talk about like the science of Judaism, and they felt like what they were doing was like science and empirical and proven. And so since then, like there's better techniques in science, so like physics and chemistry and biology have moved on. There's no one in my minion at my place. None of these physicists think that the documentary hypothesis is science or valid. We're still scholars, right? The Torah scholars are scholars also. So I think a person just has to understand, like, when you see something like that, not to be concerned, not to feel like, it's really creating a certain peer pressure, a certain people want to affirm themselves, and it's when that happens, I think a person just should shrug it off. And maybe it's not a healthy environment, for a person to be. If a person's in an environment where such non-empirical and anti-Jewish statements are being made. And that's all. I would also like to add, how do you discern a man-made interpretation from Hashem's interpretation, from the real interpretation of the Torah? So I think something very interesting is if you look at the Karaite and the Christian and the documentary hypothesis approach, so these are things where you look at the text and instantaneously, like, there's a resonance and you don't have to think, you don't have to use your mind. Whereas the Torah Shebaal Peh, the Jewish traditional approach, as far as what the Torah is saying, is a beautiful thing, because a person, when you first look at it, you have to think about it, right? And once you use your mind and you really put yourself into it, and you work really hard on a sugya to try to understand something, then when you get to the end, it creates this beautiful form, this beautiful structure. And you see amongst the Gedolim of Klal Yisrael, you picture like Rav Kanievsky and see what he wrote, or like you look at the Rishonim, and they have such a tefisa on the Torah, such a deep understanding of the Pshat and the Remez and the Sod and the Drush, and how this Gemara corresponds to this Gemara, and how Tosfos says this here, and then he said, you look at this other part of the Torah, and now it makes sense when you put these things together, and you create this whole beautiful picture, an entire structure, a whole binyan. And that's through our effort, and I think to have such a beautiful and impressive thing like that, so when that's the sort of resonance, when resonance is something that takes work, and when in the end it's actually the most beautiful structure of all, so I think that, to me, is a good way to discern whether an interpretation of the Torah, is God-made, meaning something that's deep and takes time and effort and has final beauty, or something that is, just like a short attention span sort of resonance. And, I think people like to have immediate gratification, and I think that's reflected in some of the non-traditional interpretations of the Torah.